Welcome you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the show, and if you're just joining us, what a pleasant way to welcome you to this global platform designed for you and with you in mind. It takes it takes a whole village. The African Children's Choir introducing opening our segment, the first it is the maiden edition of Peace and Justice Forum. If you just join us, I want to use this opportunity to welcome you to the broadcast. This is a global forum designed for you and with you in mind. Peace and Justice Forum is an intellectual justice platform designed for a global audience. And we're going to be coming here each week to bring you a very interesting perspective. It's going to be educational, it's going to be engaging, it's going to be bringing in scholars from all walks of life as we examine and put social justice under the blueprint of a scholarly engagement for many of you, wherever you are. We want to use this opportunity to welcome you to the show. We welcome you wherever you are in the United States and around the world. Justice, social justice in particular, is at the root of every conversation we will have here on this particular platform. The God of the oppressed has mandated us to stand up for righteousness and justice everywhere in the world. Freedom is never free. I want us to hold on to that premise that freedom is never free. And of course, unexpectedly, I learned that teaching and reading could inspire. Teaching and reading could inspire doing. And if teaching and reading can lead to doing, then it can lead to change. And I want to go back on that again to emphasize here that if teaching and reading can lead to doing, that it can lead to change. Change is for the betterment and for the strengthening of democracy, for the betterment and the strengthening of democracy around the world. This program, this particular program, it's not a proponent of violence, not at all. It advocates non-violence in every given society in bringing about the change that is necessary for the transformation of societies around the world. We support that peaceful means in transforming the world in this century. We can do this socially and spiritually to bring about transformation that is so needed. So we will come here each week to dissect. We'll come here each week to have this genuine conversation, the genuine conversation about peace and justice, keeping in mind that peace, justice, and faith are all intertwined. One cannot exist. One cannot exist without the other. And we come each week claiming and not taking any credit, but coming to educate our listeners, our viewers, throughout the length and breadth of this country where we sit, of this great United States. But equally so, that the reality of the matter, the emphasis must be made today in this maiden edition. It must be made that there are people who've come to lay the pillow, who've paid the price, who struggled through the trenches, who went through the civil rights wars, who went through the marches, who were determined to stand up for freedom, to fight together, if I may quote Brother Mountain. And it's for that purpose that we can claim today. We can claim prophetically that, yes, indeed, as Martin said on that march on Washington, 1963. And I know we haven't gravitated to that state where it can be proclaimed in keeping with that Negro spiritual, reminding us of freedom, justice, and equality. That when we can say free at last, we stay far removed from it. But the reality of the matter that there've been giants before to play the pivotal role, the role of seeking and enlightening the minds of our people and enlightening the minds of our allies in the struggle for freedom, in the struggle for freedom, in keeping with that concept that is rooted in Black consciousness and the liberative gospel, the liberative gospel. And that is what we are praying with you today. That's what we're praying for today. And that's the essence, and that's the basis for which we come. We come to launch this initiative. We come to begin an earnest conversation. We come to make this particular environment, this a sacred space where we can begin to engage, to talk about issues of relevance, and that we can make this particular sacred space affordable, accessible, and we can bring people of like minds to have this conversation. It promises to be educational. It promises to be quite enlightening. It promises to deal with issues of relevance. And of course, we will go back and deeply go into our history to be able to bring some level of clarity to relight the word again. Oh, thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zukisa Fumba. And of course, in this maiden edition of our show, we're going to share with you a few critical thoughts about what we seek to do here on this platform each week. Peace and justice, like I indicated, are intertwined. One cannot exist without the other. For many of us who are social justice activists, many of us who are involved in the propagation of the liberative and the transformative gospel, it is important for us to always take a critical look. Take a critical look at the past before taking a stance on the day, each day, that it is for justice and equity in our current times. And this program seeks to do that. It seeks to do that in a real way. Our focus today, I want to take us we'll be able to look at the role of American religious radicals, the role they play in bringing about the transformation that we have today. Although realistically, we still have a long way to go. Yes, today we'll bring you the spotlight on one of those profound radicals that play a pivotal role in that peaceful resistance, in assuring some level of emancipation for Blacks, and ensuring some level of emancipation for Blacks in this country. Total emancipation is still a long way to go. We are aware of that, even in this century. We are yet to create a more perfect union in this land. But we are far away from that. We're far away from getting there. But let the truth be told. Let the truth be told that we have made considerable progress in this century. Somewhere, brothers and sisters, are read in our Constitution that that the right to protest for rights is constitutional. And we come to you today to have this conversation. The Constitution and the First Amendment of this country has given us that right and the freedom to express our thoughts and our views on whatever subject matter that is choosing. And we intend to do that quite clearly and fairly each week when we come here. This is fundamental. The fight for rights. I'm talking about the fight for rights, for equal rights, for justice and equity. It's fundamental and it's universal in nature. It's good to be here today, brothers and sisters. It's good that we can have the opportunity to share this moment and this space. And it is particular with it is in keeping with that particular concept that we want to draw upon the saints and religious radicals of the past that have come before us. The love for what we do, which is social justice, as social justice campaigners, is to ensure that the world becomes a better place. That to ensure that redemptive suffering is good. And if redemptive suffering is good for the soul, then redemptive suffering, one can say, is prophetic. And the way to a sustainable future, the way to a sustainable future is through redemptive suffering. And the great American radical and religious leader, A.J. Muste, made it clear. Muste puts it this way, and it stands on nonviolent resistance for the liberation of blacks in this country during the era of civil rights and the marches. This is quite profound. I want you to listen to this. He writes that it is that whenever law that we suffer, a law that we suffer unto death is manifested wherever a true crucifixion takes place. Unconquerably, power is released in the stream of history. The institution that says that God has been let loose on the earth when such devotion is manifested is absolutely sound. A.J. Muste. Let me read that again. This is, thus it is that whenever law that we suffer unto death is manifested, whenever a true crucifixion takes place, unquestionably power is released into the stream of history. The institution that says that God has been let loose on the earth when such devotion is manifested is absolutely sound. Are we ready to take on our posture today? Well, we will begin with a reflection on the life of A.J. Muste, keeping in mind that this powerful voice for freedom, for struggle, for the suffering, for the oppressed in America at the time was a word for his gesture. Muste wrote the essay titled The Redemptive Power of Nonviolent Suffering. This is an essay that was written by Muste to the Negro Church. Muste's prediction was that Black Americans and their white allies would have to pay a high price to end segregation. And it's this country. And because of that essay, as the story is told, the essay was published as a pamphlet. It was distributed widely throughout this country to Black churches and among members of the community involved in organizing the march on Washington for jobs and justice in August of 1963, planned and orchestrated by brother and comrade A. Philip Randolph. Well, here's the key. Here's the key to what I would like to speak to today on this platform. Taking from the playbook. Taken from the playbook of Musty and the freedom fighters and the freedom riders and the civil rights activists of yesteryears. It is that cardinal premise. It is that cardinal premise that is at the core of Musty's vision for social change, at the core of the nonviolent movement and the nonviolent struggle for social change is the willingness, according to Musty, of the activists to suffer, even to struggle, even to die, to achieve a most, to achieve a more just society. How do we gravitate to that around the world? And I think that is the conversation today. This is quite a profound belief, and it's rooted in Black consciousness and the freedom struggle for all oppressed people all around the world. This belief, though radical as it may seem, serve as what? That lodestar for his long life. I'm talking about Musty's long life of activism in the causes of peace, labor, civil rights, and nuclear disarmament. They are crucial. We need them. They are crucial. Even in the present time, they are crucial. My brothers and sisters, and that is what it is important that today. It is important that today, as we come here, it is important today that as we have this earnest conversation, it is important today that we can begin to look in that direction, to be able to shift the atmosphere. And in a theological sense, God has to shift the atmosphere to ensure that consciousness is rooted and is at the bottom of the Black experience. Are we ready today to take on that course? Are we ready today? Are we determined to look ahead and begin to ask those real pivotal questions? Are we ready today? Well, this is the Peace and Justice Forum. And this is why we are beginning this earnest conversation, that as we begin this conversation, as we begin to look no deeper into the activities of our time, that we can begin to ask those genuine questions about what is it that is needed? What is it that is needed to bring about the desperate change that is needed for ourselves and our communities and the world that we find ourselves in? Are we ready today? Are we ready to take on that challenge? That prediction that if the oppressed if the struggling, if those who are disenfranchised, if those who are marginalized, and their white allies must be in the struggle to pay a higher price, to end humiliation, to end, as Mushti put it at a time, to end segregation in this country. And like I indicated, we've come a mighty long way, but there are still issues within our current time that we see each and every day that we must continue to advocate, we must continue to stand up for. We must continue to struggle together. We must continue to create that level of awareness and to ensure that social justice will prevail. My brothers and sisters, I want to welcome you to this forum, Peace and Justice Forum. This is the maiden edition, and this evening is good that we can be engaging with you. It's good that we can be engaging with you and beginning this earnest conversation. And there are challenges in many parts of the world. There are challenges in many areas of the world. There are challenges in different places of the world. That's why today is a great privilege. And through the sharing of these stories, as Brother Martin reported, through the sharing of our stories, and we become aware of that pain. We become aware of the pain. We become aware of the loss. We become aware of the injustice so many have faced. And acknowledging that pain as we talk, acknowledging that pain allows us to begin that actual earnest hard work, that hard work, the work of healing, that hard work of healing, action, and to ensure change. So on that pivotal note, I want us to remember that because I think it is quite crucial, as Brother Martin would say. Brother Martin would say, and as Brother Martin would put it, in creating what is needed that is called the beloved community. The beloved community. The beloved community, as Brother Martin will portray it, as he will characterize it. The beloved community is never going to be created by legislation or by laws. Never would they be. And that's the earnest conversation on Peace and Justice Forum that we come to have. Peace and Justice Forum that we come to share. And I quote Musti again. And I quote Musti again, reminding us of that unconquerable power. Unconquerable power that is released into the stream of history. And if we can take into account that if we are willing to go through that price genuinely, with that conviction, with that deep conviction, then truly indeed, we can bring about the transformation that is needed in the world. And where really to begin? Where really to begin than a place called South Africa. A place called South Africa. A place of struggle, a place of challenges, a place of difficulties. Welcome, brothers and sisters, if you just joined us. This is the Peace and Justice Forum. This is a sacred space in which we discuss a wide range of issues regarding matters of justice, matters of equity, matters deeply rooted in structural systems that have the tendency to keep people marginalized and oppressed. They are so systemic. How do we go about challenging the status quo? to begin to break down and tear down these walls of violence. Either it's against women, or it's against men, or it's against vulnerable, or it's against people of color. That is the epic question today. And of course, what an interesting conversation it is. Like I said, where better to start but to start in South Africa? It's good that we have two distinguished guests with us today. Now, brothers and sisters, at the center of Christianity, there can be no theology without justice. There can be no theology without liberation. There can be no theology. There can be no theology without emancipation. That's crucial. And it's good to have you with us today on this Peace and Justice Forum. What an interesting way to begin this conversation. I'm going to be bringing two individuals into the conversation who will talk to us about what is prevailing in South Africa. We want to take it from the faith aspect today. Yes, from the South African perspective. We want to look at the South African Faith and Family Institute. The South African Faith and Family Institute is a nonprofit. It's based in Cape Town, South Africa. The executive director happens to be Dr. Elizabeth H. Petersen. Dr. Petersen is an incredible African scholar who has interacted and engaged with battered women many, many years ago. And it is from that particular social context that she's driven to be in the struggle for freedom, for education, for liberating the minds, and bringing men and women of faith together to have the earnest conversation about abuse and marginalization, but also to affirm men, good men, great men, who are genuinely committed to their spouses, committed to their wives, committed to ensuring that our sisters, our mothers are respected. The genuine conversation around faith that centers around justice and equity, those gender challenges. It's quite indeed an interesting day to be here today on this maiden edition. And it's what a great privilege it is for me to welcome our distinguished guests. They're coming out of Cape Town, South Africa, where Dr. Petersen is based. And also, as part of the conversation today, is going to be a minister of the gospel, a religious leader, a United Methodist, all the way coming out of Joburg, Johannesburg, South Africa. It's quite indeed a privilege today that we can have this opportunity to have this conversation. And by the way, I'm going to light the distinguished colleagues who are coming all the way from South Africa to come to the show. Welcome, Elizabeth. Could you introduce yourself for the benefit of our audience today?
Thank you very much. My name is Elizabeth Horn Petersen, and I am the founder and the executive director of the South African Faith and Family Institute. Our office is based in Cape Town, but the work reaches, much further than just Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. And let me go to my second guest. He will introduce himself. Good day. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Rev Zaizai. It's Zukisa Fumba. I am the ordained minister in the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. I am currently stationed here in Highveld in the Swatini district, serving in Benoni Circuit, in the local congregation called Northfield Methodist Church. I've been here in Johannesburg for the past almost 2 years. I was serving before in Cape Town. And I am joining this podcast in my personal capacity as the minister here in the Methodist Church. I am the district gender desk convener here in my district here in Highveld and Eswatini. And also, I also voluntarily serve at the board of SAFFI, work with Elizabeth as one of the board members there in the board. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
This is a quite interesting global conversation. Two distinguished individuals joining from Cape Town and Johannesburg. It has a considerable history when we talk about the issues surrounding social justice, oppression, affirming human dignity, both from a colonial standpoint, from an imperialistic standpoint. But we will get to navigate those threads as we go along. The South African Faith and Family Institute, Elizabeth, you've done considerable work in this particular area of social work. Let's begin as a preliminary question for the benefit of our listeners and our viewers. How did it all come about? SAFFI, as it has become to be known now. Take us back.
It's a very long story, which I obviously will not go into. Folk can actually check our website also to read up a little bit more and so forth. But, in short, to say that I think I've known for a very long time that I'm supposed to work with men who abuse their intimate partners and also with religious leaders from various faith traditions. And I think the whole area of working on the faith dimension of gender-based violence in intimate relationships and families also stem from, I guess, my growing up. I've never seen my dad use violence or abuse or shaming or any of that thing, that sort with my mother or with any of us as his children. And I'm one of 9 children. So growing up in a difficult circumstances, as most of you would know, in South Africa under apartheid, Black people going through all sorts of dehumanizing experiences. But in the midst of all of that, I've never seen my dad use violence or abuse. So it's interesting because, like I said, I guess probably from the time when I was a teenager, I had this clarity of vision that I'm supposed to work with men who abuse their partners and with religious leaders. And it was only much later when I obtained my social work degree and my first job that I actually landed in a shelter for abused women and children. And that's the oldest shelter in South Africa. It was started in 1904, St. Anne's Homes, which is based here in Cape Town. And I think there I've seen and witnessed how women flee for their lives, and many of these children don't even know what it is to witness a healthy man, because the women would come and they're either pregnant or they are women with young children. And I think that whole experience have really further refined for me the urgency of this work. Because the question that I always then lived with was, how do you get from a place of deep connection, loving, intimate relationship to a place where that relationship becomes such a toxic, violent, abusive space of terror and horror. And then I think also some of the other things that had happened. Another job that I had while I was working at St. Anne's, I was one of the first counselors for one of the first battered women counseling centers here in Cape Town. And I remember, you know, one of the women that actually came into that center for counseling was a woman that went to the same church as I. And I know her and I know her husband because we grew up together in church. I mean, her husband, you know, we're part of the youth. And I was hoping that she was basically lost and that she was just popping into the center to ask for directions. Because I did not want to know that, you know, that there was any violence or abuse that she was experiencing. Only, of course, to discover that she actually did come to the center because she needed counseling. And there I had to sit, being the only counselor, I literally had to sit and listen to all the horrible things that my friend, who was a man of faith, you know, have been doing to this woman. And but there's also countless stories afterwards, you know, that I've had, you know, close friends in the church, men who have been abusing their wives, men, some of them were faith leaders. Sometimes the church knew about them, but the church didn't know what, or kind of either tried to ignore the issue. And so, and only when there's, infidelity, only when he finally, you know, it's discovered that he has an affair outside of the marriage, then almost permission is given for the woman to divorce him. And so there's that. But then on top of that, I think afterwards I've also realized that I probably need to do some research. So my master's research focused on challenges that clergy face in addressing domestic violence. And that research, amongst a whole range of other, you know, sort of local and international research, informed the establishment of SAFFI. Yeah, so I think, you know, like I said, there's a lot to be said about that, but it's a combination of those, what I've just shared.
Very, very inspiring story from those very early beginnings. And you were quite right on point to indicate some of the challenges that the church has faced in the midst of the abuses that take place. The church is a voice of conscience. Reverend Zukes,
Yes.
let me bring you into the picture. How did you come in contact with SAFFI, with Elizabeth, Dr. Petersen? And by the way, congratulations, Elizabeth. Elizabeth just received her PhD from the University of the Western Cape. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
2 sleeps ago, I got it.
Okay, that's quite correct. Congratulations, Elizabeth. Yeah, Reverend Zukes. Let me bring you into the conversation. You're not a Methodist pastor in South Africa. SAFFI is doing a considerable work of justice, not only in South Africa, in other parts of the world. Elizabeth will get to talk to us as we progress into this program. Some of the major engagements she's been involved with in terms of whether it's educational, pro-advocacy in different parts of the world. But bringing you into the picture, what gravitated you to SAFFI, and you as a Methodist pastor, those challenging conversations pastors must have with their congregants, with their followers, with their parishioners. Talk to us a little bit as we begin this very interesting and fascinating conversation about SAFFI, its work in South Africa and other parts of the world.
Thank you so much, Rev, for the opportunity. I am the minister in the Methodist Church of Southern Africa.
Okay.
Southern
Southern
Africa.
Africa. Yeah.
Yes, not South Africa. South Africa being part of it as well. So in the whole southern region here in Africa. So that's our connection. So it's not only South Africa. I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. Are you strategically with the church in the Swaziland region?
Yes, the church in Swaziland is part of our conference. The church in Mozambique is part of our conference. The church in Botswana is part of our conference. The church in Namibia is part of our conference, and the church in South Africa. So those are the countries that makes up our connection. So it's those countries around in the Southern Africa.
That's wonderful. And talk to us how you gravitated. We thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It is not too long ago, but it was in 2015 when myself and other Methodist ministers outside the bishop's office in Cape Town, that it was on a Saturday, and there were women ministers who gathered on that morning for a meeting. And I was still fresh from seminary then. I wanted to find out as to why are we not part of the conversation? And I was told that there is a conversation about women's issues. I'm not sure the echo, whether it's coming from me or where does it come from. There seemed to be an echo, but I can continue if it's not disturbing you.
No, not at all. Please do.
Oh, thank you so much. And so I was so inquisitive. I said, I'm the minister. I want to know what is going on. And little did I know that there was a transformative work that was taking place of gender. You know, it happened to be one of our ministers. It was all ladies gathered there. And my interest began from that Saturday after attending the meeting, or rather, while attending the meeting, and in several meetings afterwards, I was asked, Zooks, you are going to be our secretary, you're going to be our scribe. And it was a life-giving and refreshing moment for me to get to learn about gender dynamics and complexities and the difficulties about gender within the church specifically. And it was just a year before in the Methodist Church, we celebrated 40 years, only 40 years since women have been accepted into the order of presbyters and ordained. And so I think it was the following year whereby SAFFI was invited by our bishop then, Reverend Michelle Hanstott, in one of our synods that I get to know about SAFFI. And I read about SAFFI, and there was two representatives that I got to know at a distance, Elizabeth, and back then she is currently a doctor as well, Megan Robertson. So I got to know about the work of SAFFI and the work that was very much at the level of people and dealing with clergy, religious leaders, empowering and strengthening religious leaders to deal with this kind of work that even here in church, we don't know how to do the ministry that are life-giving, specifically with focus on gender and all its complexities and harmfulness and how it can bring life to homes, households, as Elizabeth spoke about the intimate partner relationship to actually make families flourish, you know, out of doing this kind of work. And so later in the years, I got to know Elizabeth as I attended general meeting of SAFFI and the work of SAFFI. So the relationship began to a point that they risk so much to ask me to be one of the board members. And it's been quite a privilege for me, you know, as a minister in the local congregation, having to work with organizations like SAFFI to empower myself, empowering the congregation to deal with gender matters, which are so complex. And I got to understand how much, as the church, we have contributed and in many instances continue to contribute in this, what I call the evilness towards humanity, which is gender violence in all levels of its shape. So that's how I got to know SAFFI. That's how I got to be part of the work of SAFFI. Even to date, I continue to offer myself, to offer my time to SAFFI's work, and continue to learn from SAFFI. And even got to a position in the past, I'll say from 2019, I had the privilege from Cape Town to work with SAFFI, spoke with my bishop. The bishop was so excited with the work of SAFFI, and SAFFI has been part of the Methodist Church, you know, at least in the 2 districts, from the Cape of Good Hope and even here in Highveld and Eswatini. SAFFI continues not only to work outside but inside the church practically, you know, sharing some of their experiences when it comes to dealing with gender matters, to celebrate. I always say to celebrate the image of God, you know. So at the center of SAFFI's work, as a public witness from my side, I find a clear proclamation of humanity as bearers of the image of God. And it is in the work of SAFFI that cross-pollinate with what I deem it as the work of the church, you know. And I think, let me just stop there. That's how I got to know SAFFI in a very condensed way.
It's quite truth-telling and quite profound insight you've given to us, Reverend Zooks. Let me come back to you, Elizabeth. SAFFI and some of its beliefs, you genuinely believe that religious leaders and faith communities have that pivotal role to play in addressing violence against women. Talk to us in terms of your engagement with faith-based communities, the interfaith conversation around this particular aspect of human dignity. Men, affirming men, and when you gave us that response, then I'll be able to make some follow-ups. I know you were recently in Liberia. We get to talk about that. But what is it like in South Africa, engaging all these sorts of different groups with different conceptualizations and ideologies? And let's talk about those teachings and how you get involved, bringing a pastor, an imam, and others who are within different aspects of the faith community, a rabbi coming together to have some of these conversations in the South African context for the benefit of our listeners.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Firstly, I want to say that Africans take God and evil in the world seriously. And religion and faith and culture and spirituality is an important part. In fact, that is who we are as, you know, as African people. And so I think that is the first thing, that's sort of the point from which we move, the worldview, the understanding from which SAFFI moves. And we understand that in the history of colonialism and slavery and all of these things, especially the onslaught of Africa and African countries, many of our African countries and states post colonialism, or when they moved into independence, have often declared themselves to be secular states. You know, we have that. Our understanding is that you cannot separate faith, spirituality, and religion from African people. That's African understanding. And so our beliefs become quite critical. What we believe about ourselves, what we believe about God, and what we believe God requires of us as individuals and in relation to one another becomes very, very critical. And so I guess when I started in the gender-based violence field at the beginning of the 1990s, I was quite surprised that in the domestic violence field, people did not want to speak about religion and faith, and people did not want to speak about men. So, you know, I kind of thought that's quite odd. You know, how do you address the root cause if you do not actually speak about the beliefs that informs, you know, the behavior? And so I think it's important to start to just frame it from that context. Also, since in South Africa, at least, more than 90% of the population affiliates to religion, Christianity being one of the you know, I mean, probably over 75% of the population affiliates to religion, to Christianity. And so we are living in a society that is completely, you know, religion and faith is in fact the air that we breathe and culture. And so that's important to start from that point. And of course, the fact that that issues of faith has been almost demonized, or people in the gender-based violence sector never wanted to address faith issues. Or when they did address faith issues, it was always talking about it in the problematic sense. Faith and religion and culture, the starting point is always, or most often, culture and religion as harmful. And so SAFFI, what SAFFI believes is that the minute you start, the tone on which you start the conversation determines whether you are opening up the conversation or whether you are closing down and silence people. And so, of course, when you speak about religion and culture, starting the conversation from it being problematic, we believe that you are silencing countless women and families who may be afflicted by gender-based violence, by intimate partner abuse, especially because of our context. And so I think the research that we have done also both locally and internationally confirmed that religious leaders are not necessarily being prepared by their theological training or by the institutions when it comes to how to intervene when in situations where there is intimate partner abuse and domestic violence. And so, of course, you can see then for SAFFI, it becomes important. We amplify faith and culture as resources, and then we create spaces of safety for faith leaders to engage. So with regards to the work with other faiths, it's, or with, you know, the various faith traditions, we've I think our board, for example, we have a board that we try to be intentional, you know, to get people, qualified people in various fields from different religions. So SAFFI's board, for example, consists of people from different religions. Then also what we've established in 2014, what we call a theological advisory council on gender-based violence. And that is a council that has, and again, the intention is to have at least a woman and a man scholar, like scholars or theologians from different religions that, that serves, or that comes together on that council. And what we've done so far is to get them to write, and we've got 2 publications, where we get these theologians and scholars from these different religions to actually write about certain topics. So we have 2 publications. The one is on the root causes of men's violence against women, and we ask them to write from their tradition, their faiths, what are some of the easily misinterpreted scriptures and teachings that reinforces, these abusive men being abusive towards women, but also what are the resources that is just not tapped into from the scripture. And a second publication that we asked them to contribute to was, what are the resources that we get from ancient teachings and from religion when it comes to interventions with men who abuse their intimate partners. So really getting them to think about and write from their scriptures, what are the resources?
To Elizabeth H. Petersen, there with a very interesting conversation with us today on the Peace and Justice Forum. This is the debated edition of the show. We will thank you so much for being a part of the program. Earlier, you listened to Zukisa Fumba. Reverend Zukisa Fumba happens to be a United Methodist minister in the South African United Methodist Church. He's based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Elizabeth, who happens to be the executive director of the South African Faith and Family Institute, is based in Cape Town, South Africa. We want to use this opportunity to thank them both for appearing today on the show and this maiden edition of our program, Peace and Justice Forum. I want to thank you for being a part of this particular interesting and fascinating edition. We will come here each week. We will come here to debate. We'll come here to talk about issues of relevance. We'll come here to talk about issues of justice, issues of faith, because peace, justice, and faith are all intertwined, as I said from the very beginning. And thinking from the very concept of one of those major religious radicals of the American conceptualization in the freedom struggle, A.J. Muste, then the reality of the matter is that we must be prepared and we must be intentional to ensure justice, intentional to fight for justice, intentional to ensure that there is equity. And the civil rights movement played a pivotal role in bringing about the march on Washington. We will be bringing you some perspective from the past on this program, because this program is not only entertaining, it's also educational, and it's historical. And we go into the archives to bring you the perspectives from there. I want to thank you for listening today. Peace and Justice Forum on this particular platform. We are engaging and we are having continuing conversation. It is our hope and our belief and our prayer that we will be beginning an extended conversation in keeping with this particular dream, in keeping with this particular perspective, ensuring that we can bring some level of education, some level of liberation, some level of engagement to the wider audience, both here in the United States and, of course, around the world. Our brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa, we want to thank you so much for being a part of this particular program. And I want you to know that through the sharing of our stories, we become aware of the very pain that Elizabeth just alluded to. Through the sharing of our stories, we become aware of our pain, the loss, and the injustice that many of our people have faced in the past, in the present, and we also face in the future. In the effort in ensuring that we can be able to create a level playing field that will create the atmosphere of equity, that people will be treated not on the basis of the color of their skin, but the content of their character, if I may quote Brother Martin Luther King Jr. And if we're going to make the world a straight place, not a crooked place, then we must be prepared to roll up our sleeves. People in the struggle and as disciples of Christ, as people who seek institutional equity. And if there must be global equity, if there must be justice, then there must be education. Because as we said from the very beginning, true teaching, true reading, and of course doing, then there will be change. Because through reading and doing, we can be able to create the impact that is necessary in bringing about the transformation that the world needs. On that note, I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. And this closing, let's take from Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King made it quite well. He understood that the beloved community would never be mandated through a policy or law. The beloved community, according to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., will never be mandated through legislation or law. He said quite poignantly, it will have to come from all of us, everyday citizens, taking action together, side by side. We end this edition of a Peace and Justice Forum on that note from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today's edition, this maiden edition. We'll be back again with another interesting, fascinating edition of the show. We hope it's been great, and we want to thank you. We'd love to hear from you. Give us your feedback. Go into the comment section. Right now, you can do that, or even after the program, we will read them when we take a look. But it's been quite fascinating being a part of this particular edition of the show today. My name is Zizi Kwipagi, thanking you all the way from South Africa. They're going to take us home. It takes a whole village.